What's going on, everybody? Greg Morgan, aka GoodMicWork, back at you. Welcome to episode 500. I wanted to start off the video this week with a cold open for a couple of reasons. Number one is that I wanted to thank all of you personally for the amazing support you've shown me over the years. I have been doing this now for 8 years on YouTube, and we are on our 500th episode, and many of you have been with me right from the start. And regardless of whether or not you're an older listener or a newer listener, when, where, or how you found me, you guys always show me a ton of love, a ton of respect, a ton of appreciation, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. It's truly an honor and a privilege to come up here and make YouTube videos for you guys, and I hope to be up here for another 8 years and another 500 episodes. The other reason why I'm up here is because this video falls on the anniversary of Owen Hart's death. It's been 19 years now since Owen Hart passed away, and for those of you who have been listening to me over the years, you know how important Bret Hart, Owen Hart, and the entire Hart family was to me as a wrestling fan. And unfortunately, it's a tragic day in wrestling that I have very, very vivid memories of, and I've told many stories about in the past. And it still haunts me to this very day. I miss Owen very much, so I wanted to dedicate this commentary, this video, episode 500, to the life and the memory of Owen Hart. So you guys sit back and relax, and I hope you enjoy episode 500. Let's rock and roll.
You're listening to Good Mike Work Commentaries, hosted by Greg Morgan, a pro wrestling podcast for adults, discussing the fun, wild, and sometimes insane world of professional wrestling.
What's going on, everybody? Good Mike Work Commentaries back at you with episode 500. Holy crap, 500 episodes. Pretty crazy. As you can tell here, this episode is not going to be all that much different than my normal podcasts. I'm going to give you a Raw and SmackDown review for this week. We're going to preview the entire Money in the Bank card. We'll talk about WWE's new deal with the Fox Network and SmackDown heading over there in 2019. And aside from that, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to do a very short, small little mailbag segment where I'm going to answer a few email questions and some Patreon questions. I also want to thank all of you that tuned in on Monday night for part one of this episode. I kind of did a 500th episode celebration live stream on Monday where I came up here and live reacted to Monday Night Raw, and then I hung around for another 3 hours or so after that. I think I did a total of about 6 hours on the live stream, and we just talked about Raw, SmackDown, we talked about Money in the Bank, I answered a ton of questions, and it was basically just a fun little hangout, very casual, chill session with all of you guys, and it was fun to hang out and celebrate the fact that I've now done this 500 times. Pretty incredible, but I'm not going to bore you guys with too much bullshit here in the beginning. I just wanted to get all of my thank yous out of the way, and of course, this episode is dedicated to Owen Hart. Today happens to be the anniversary of his death. He died 19 years ago today, which is insane, and it's kind of funny. A few years ago, episode 200 also fell on the anniversary of Owen Hart's death. It was really strange, and I came up and did a small little tribute video to him, which has since been taken down because I used some footage in it and WWE blocked it. So unfortunately, that video does no longer exist, but it is kind of funny how episode 200 and 500 fell right on this day. So rest in peace, Owen Hart. We all love you very much. We're going to get into Raw first, and then I'm going to talk about SmackDown, and then I will give you what I have written down for the entire Money in the Bank card so far. And like I said, we'll talk about the Fox deal, and then I'll answer some questions, and I'm going to get out of here. So this is not going to be a short podcast, but it's not going to be a very long one either, because we don't have a whole lot to talk about as far as Raw and SmackDown goes this week. I think SmackDown was better than Raw, in my personal opinion. I think most people would agree with me on that. Raw this week was absolutely horrendous. As a matter of fact, Raw was so bad that I think it put a hurtin' on my 500th episode celebration. Normally, my audience is a little bit bigger for my live streams on Monday, but I think WWE is so stale right now. We've got a long 5 or 6 week gap here in between pay-per-views, and WWE seems like they're in that treading water mode at the moment, and I think interest overall just with the fans is down right now. I know it is with me. When I was doing my stream on Monday, I was barely paying attention to Raw. I think I was just hanging out and shooting the shit with you guys for most of that show. But I'm going to kind of bounce around. I'm not going to go right in order and talk about every single little thing on Monday Night Raw. We're just going to talk about the big segments, and trust me, and don't worry, I will have plenty to say about the Lashley sisters segment as well. But I'm going to start with the opening segment on Monday Night Raw. We had Kurt Angle coming out there to cut a promo, and he was interrupted by a returning Stephanie McMahon. I have not missed her. I wish she would have stayed gone a little bit longer. The minute her stupid music hit, I was like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? She came out there. She was horrible and annoying and bitchy on the mic like she always is. She treated Kurt like a piece of shit and also let him know that he would not be moderating the contract signing later on that night between Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, but she would be doing it instead. And as a matter of fact, backstage, I think she even kicked him out of his office, or he claimed that he's letting Stephanie use his office, but I think we all know better there. And the contract signing was, I don't know if we can count on one hand. You guys are going to have to, all my researchers out there, you guys can look into the facts here, but how many times have we seen a contract signing that has not ended in people getting their asses kicked? We actually saw a handshake between these two. Stephanie was out there kind of stirring the pot once Ronda and Nia got out there and they sat at the table. Stephanie is basically cutting a promo on both of them, trying to rile up Nia and trying to rile up Ronda Rousey as well. And neither one of the ladies are really falling for it, although things get a little tense at the end. Ronda, I think, shoves the table out of the way. They get in each other's face and have a little bit of a stare down, and they shake hands, and that match is on for Money in the Bank. It was a big topic of conversation a week ago when that match was announced, especially the way they did it at that convention or whatever it was in New York. Now, I also speculated last week after I defended the decision to do the match, which a lot of people had a huge problem with. Oh, it doesn't make any sense and Ronda doesn't deserve it. I made my thoughts known on that. You can check out episode 499 if you want to hear what I have to say about that stupid argument. The match is happening, and I think as far as where you can go in the future, what you can do with a match like this, it's not really that bad of a decision to put this match on Money in the Bank. It's in Chicago. It's in a big market. There's another certain wrestling show that's going to be in Chicago just a couple of months after this. Maybe WWE is trying to give that market a big-time money match here, and I think giving Ronda Rousey her first ever title shot is a pretty big match to have in front of this Chicago audience. So I really don't think it's a bad idea. I would rather see this than what we saw at Backlash, or Nia Jax wrestling anybody else for that matter. And enough of these women are tied up in the Money in the Bank anyway. This is probably a good time to do it. And I had speculated last week that between the two women's title matches that we're going to get at Money in the Bank, Asuka and Carmella and Nia and Ronda Rousey, I don't think both belts are going to change hands. I think one belt will and one belt won't. There has been a lot of speculation, especially with Stephanie resurfacing, that Stephanie is going to do something to screw Ronda Rousey because their issue was not over at WrestleMania. It carried over into the next night on Monday Night Raw where Ronda, nearly broke Stephanie's arm a second time. So you got to think that Stephanie has got a trick up her sleeve here. There's now some talk of turning Nia Jax heel, and I think that's probably a good idea. They turned her babyface, I think, partly because of that whole anti-bullying type of message they were trying to spread with her and Alexa. But now that that's over, they should turn her back heel because you got enough babyfaces. Between Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax and somebody like Ember Moon and Bayley and Sasha, that's a lot of baby faces. So if you turn Nia Jax heel, that opens up the door for Ember Moon and Ronda to move into the top babyface spots. And with Sasha and Bayley, one of them are going to turn on each other too. So turning Nia Jax heel, I think, is perfectly fine. There's another wild card that I've been mentioning right from the start. From the minute the Superstar shakeup happened, I was calling out a Ronda Rousey and Natalya feud because they have really been playing up the friendship between the two. Natalya seemed like she turned babyface overnight, and I thought that was kind of weird. Even this past week on TV, they're showing pictures from Twitter of the two of them over in Paris and posing in front of the Eiffel Tower and doing all this BFF shit together, right? So eventually you got to think that these two are going to have some sort of a confrontation and Natalya could turn heel. So you could either get Nia Jax turning heel, aligning herself with Stephanie McMahon and retaining the title, or you could have Natalya either turn heel in the match by coming out and screwing Ronda Rousey or by cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase because she did qualify for that match. So if you have her win it and then Ronda beats Nia Jax later on in the night, and then Natalya maybe shows up after the match, cashes in the very same night. the same way Dean Ambrose did a few years back. Like I said last week, I think the fans got way ahead of themselves and automatically started losing their shit over the decision to have this match, where when you look at it, if you take a couple of those scenarios into consideration, this could actually be a good thing. If they did do a swerve where Nia Jax turned heel or Natalya screwed her, would that be so bad? To have Stephanie McMahon, exact a little bit of revenge on Ronda Rousey? Fans are so quick to get angry, they don't think that this could actually be a good thing. Now, on the other side of that coin, Ronda Rousey could win the belt. And I said when this match was announced that I could definitely see that happening, because I think WWE would really like to have Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey be champions at the same time. I think that would make for incredible photo opportunities. The two of them could do publicity appearances together and go on ESPN and go on talk shows and shit. Two former UFC champions, now both champions in the WWE at the same time. So maybe if they do a Natalya heel turn where she cashes in the briefcase, maybe it's after Money in the Bank. Maybe it's not the same night. Maybe they give Ronda a little bit of time with the belt and in order for her to get her public appearances in, and then have Natalya screw her over at Extreme Rules or maybe even SummerSlam. But as it stands right now with these ladies, we have a lot of options of how this match can go. And you guys gave me a lot of ideas last week. I told you in last week's episode, put your ideas in the comments, and a lot of you threw out some scenarios. And a lot of those scenarios were the same as the ones I just mentioned here. So feel free to do the same thing this week. Go down below. Let me know what you think WWE can do with this angle, where they're going to go with it. I'm not really 100% sure yet where my predictions are going to go for these title matches, but I'm definitely open to ideas. So hit me with them in the comments below. So going back to the opening segment of Raw, aside from Stephanie announcing her involvement in the contract signing between Nia and Rousey, the opening segment actually kind of revolved around Roman Reigns and Jinder Mahal again. So those two guys had their big brawl last week, and Jinder got speared viciously through a wall of cardboard. And as Stephanie is out there talking, Roman Reigns comes out and interrupts her. And then he is interrupted, I think, then by Kevin Owens. And that's when Stephanie makes a match between Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns one-on-one. So that match opened the show. They went about 20 minutes. And it ended in a no decision, I think, or maybe a DQ, when Jinder Mahal interfered and there was a brawl, and then Seth Rollins came out to make the save. And then during commercial, they set up an impromptu tag team match with Seth and Roman taking on Kevin Owens and Jinder Mahal. So that whole first segment there and the two matches took up the first hour of Monday Night Raw. In the end, we saw Roman and Seth Rollins getting the victory. Seth nailed Kevin Owens with the blackout and got the pin. And it was funny, too. I was hearing a lot of people say, oh, WWE's just trying to put Roman with Seth as an attempt to get him over. Okay, I know it's fun to say that everything WWE does is an attempt to get Roman Reigns over, but let's not be stupid here. It's not like it doesn't make sense for these two guys to have an alliance. They used to be part of a faction. I don't know if you remember it. It was a three-man group. They debuted somewhere around 2012, I think, and they wore all black. There was another guy involved that's not on TV right now. He's injured. I forgot what his name was. All three of them won a few titles in WWE. They did pretty well for themselves, and if I'm not mistaken, the faction was slightly over. So they have a little bit of history there between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. You guys can remind me what the name of that group was. I forget. But basically, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins have been bros on television for a while now. It is not that crazy that they teamed up for a tag team match on Raw. Not everything is done in an attempt to get Roman Reigns over. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is this not a fucking demotion? I mean, I am not excited, any more excited than you guys are to see Roman Reigns against fucking Jinder Mahal at Money in the Bank. I'd rather watch Paul Heyman roll around naked in a kiddie pool full of applesauce than watch this fucking match. But it's happening, and at least it keeps Roman Reigns, number one, away from the title picture, and number two, out of the Money in the Bank briefcase match. He has got a meaningless match with Jinder Mahal at Money in the Bank. I literally give less than a shit about who wins or what they do. I'm not interested in the feud. I care absolutely nothing about it. So as much as I think this match is going to suck and it's stupid and I don't care about the program, for all the people that complain about Roman Reigns, this should make you happy because Roman Reigns is doing something, pretty unimportant on the roster right now. I know WWE likes to pretend that Jinder is still a big deal, but he's not. Nobody gives a shit about him. And this feud is just something thrown at Roman Reigns to give him something to do while WWE thinks about if they even want to continue to push this guy. He's going to get another match with Brock, you know that. He's going to be Universal Champion one day, but this idea that he's on the top of every pay-per-view and winning every single main event, no, this is essentially a mid-card match. This is the least important match on the card as of right now for Money in the Bank. So, I mean, unless they put this shit in the main event or something, which some people have speculated on, I highly doubt that. I cannot imagine, on a show with two big women's title matches, two big ladder matches, they're going to put Roman and fucking Jinder on last. I don't think so, Tim. I mean, hell, we got a WWE title match on this pay-per-view as well. So there's just no way that's going to happen. And if it does, I would be really surprised. But I, for one, am totally fine with Roman Reigns being in this position because at least it keeps him out of the main event and away from the title picture, at least for this month. And he's going to be tied up in his dumb little program with Jinder Mahal that will probably have a blow-off at Extreme Rules. And then maybe Roman heads into SummerSlam to maybe get a title shot, maybe not. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For right now, Roman Reigns is not bothering me. In my opinion, the biggest reason Raw sucked this week was because of the horrible segment with Sami Zayn and the Lashley sisters. And I said in episode 499, I said I have a really bad feeling about this. WWE is going to come off looking like a bunch of assholes in this segment. I just knew they were going to do something dumb, hokey, stupid, foolish, offensive, racist, whatever. They were going to do something that was going to make them look so bad because there was no way this segment could be good. Especially after they already tried to pull this shit a few months back with Alexa Bliss and the This Is Your Life segment with Bayley and how horrible that was. You would think that they would learn their lesson, but no. WWE really thinks that this shit that they put together was going to be entertaining. They really thought that the crowd would be laughing and would be into it when everybody just shit on it. It was horrible, and it was literally exactly what I thought it would be. I was like, you know what? WWE's going to bring out 3 imposters. Sami Zayn's going to use them to make fun of Bobby Lashley, and then Lashley's going to come out there and kick his ass. And that's pretty much what they did, except for instead of female impersonators, they had men dressed up in drag. One motherfucker had a mustache. One of them had a broom because I guess she chased him around with a broom. And the other one, I don't know what the fuck was going on there. And Sammy interviewed all 3 of them and made fun of Lashley, of course. And they all told stories about what a bully Bobby Lashley was and how horrible he was. I think they said they had to call the cops on him and how abusive he was and all that shit. Eventually, Bobby Lashley's music hits and he comes out there smiling his fucking ass off, which just drives me nuts. I'm trying to look at this, as sick as it sounds, in a real-life situation. If somebody is out there in public, in front of 15,000 people, making fun of your family, don't you think you would be a little bit mad? Bobby Lashley took the time to hug and high-five every single 5-year-old kid in the front row before he got to the ring. I saw his big, white, pearly teeth the whole time because he was grinning from ear to ear, and he just slowly walked down to the ring, casually took his time, eventually got in the ring, and still didn't even go nuts right away. Started fucking with the sisters a little bit, and he was just doing a lot of smiling. Eventually, he started kicking all 4 of their asses, which he did, beat the crap out of all 4 of them, and did his thing in there. But still, it didn't feel right. The fans didn't care. They were virtually silent throughout the whole thing. It was just a horrible segment that didn't do Bobby Lashley any favors at all. And I mentioned that in last week's episode too, is that another reason why this segment annoyed me so bad is because WWE literally does not give a shit about the risks that they are taking. Bobby Lashley is already a guy that you're paying a lot of money to. You want to be a big star on the roster. So far, the fans don't give a shit. He's treading on thin ice. He's not necessarily being booed yet. It's just fans don't care. So the last thing in the world a character like Bobby Lashley needs, somebody who's already struggling to get over, the last thing he needs is to be involved in some stupid shit like this. And you're putting this character and this wrestler at great risk. But WWE doesn't care. They don't think that far ahead. They just want to entertain themselves. I think the only people in the entire arena in Albany that were laughing at that segment were sitting back at Gorilla. I'll guarantee you. It was that bad. So WWE, I understand that you have to have segments like this, these little tongue-in-cheek moments and these funny, entertaining things, and people have to come out there and dress up as people. I get it. You bring out little people. You've had Obama and Trump and Clinton, and you've had Rosie O'Donnell, and you've had so many different disguises of idiots coming out there and doing shit. And don't even get me started about back in the day when we had the Raw special guest hosts. So there's always some really dumb segments that we're going to see on TV. I get that. But the fact that a creative team collectively sat down at a table and put this bowl of shit together blows my mind. Blows my mind that these people get paid to write something this bad. I think what it is people just don't give a shit. I think that there's probably some writers and some people in creative that see something written down on paper and they say to themselves, this is going to be the worst fucking thing we've ever seen. But it's not worth it to speak up. Nobody even cares. They're like, you know what? I'm getting a paycheck. Who cares what we put out on TV? This is what they want to do. Fine. I'm not going to speak up and say it's dumb because all that can do is get me heat with the company, and I sure as shit don't need that. So I think it's a combination of just laziness, people not caring, and WWE being so goddamn out of touch that some people there actually thought that this would come off well on television, which I told you a week before it was going to be shitty. You know, and all of this, you know, this women's empowerment and this women's revolution. First, they go over to Saudi Arabia where women aren't even allowed to compete. And now they've got men dressed up in drag. I mean, what the fuck is going on? It was bad. So I don't often come up here and yell and scream and rant on the WWE. This is about as close as you'll get to me calling them idiots. But they were definitely idiots on Monday night. That was horrible. And the scariest part about it is that we knew it was going to be horrible. From the very moment the words came out of Sami Zayn's mouth last week that he was inviting the Lashley sisters to be on Raw, I said, oh shit. And I hope I never have to see it again. But guess what? We are going to have to see it again probably next week because WWE's going to replay it on Raw probably 6 times in next week's episode. So get ready for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, that segment sucked, and let's move on from it. Raw didn't have a whole lot going on other than the main event, but I will blow through a few of the other matches that we had on this show. Probably the highlight of the whole show. You know, we had the horrible Lashley sisters segment, but then we had something glorious on the other side. We had the B Team wrestling a tag team match against Breezango. They even debuted brand new music, and they were even wearing their white t-shirts with the big B on it. There were some people in the front row wearing those as well. I don't know if those are available at merch stands or on WWE Shop quite yet, but I think they should market those t-shirts and don't change a thing about them. But what was funniest about this whole segment is that after they won, they both went completely apeshit. They acted as if they just won the WWE title in the main event of WrestleMania. They both ran around celebrating, jumping up and down. The best was when they got all the way up the ramp and went over to the announcer's table. They stole away Jonathan Coachman's chair. Curtis Axel jumped on the announce table and had sex with it. He literally fucked the announce table for some reason. And then the two of them got in Jonathan Coachman's chair, straddled each other in the chair, and rode the chair down the ramp until it tipped over and they fell on top of each other. So to me, this was awesome, because this is exactly what I needed to see, you know, after such a shitty Raw. And it was easily the highlight of the night. And who would have thought the two guys riding down an office chair together would be a highlight of a 3-hour wrestling show? But it was. So I really am wishing the best for Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. It's, you know, it's a fine line here. This tag team can turn out to be the New Age Outlaws, where you put two guys together who turn out to be entertaining and great together and have great chemistry and go on to become the most successful tag team in WWE history, or they can turn into the Ascension or even Breezango. So it's still up for debate here where these guys go, but right now I love them, and I hope they wind up getting a push, and I hope they're not all fun and games. I understand that they have to be entertaining and be funny. That's all fine, but I would like to see them win some serious matches also, where they're not just doing segments with Breezango and the Ascension every single week. So they may have gotten the victory here, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for them. You would think they would be a successful tag team. You know, 2 second-generation guys, they've got a lot of wrestling in their blood. Or Kurt is third generation, I believe. So with all of the bloodline of both of those two guys, I don't understand why they haven't found success yet, but this might be their best chance yet to find it. So best of luck to the B team. And like I mentioned earlier, we also had Natalya qualify for the Money in the Bank. She beat Dana Brooke, Liv Morgan, and Sarah Logan, I think in a fatal 4-way, right? That's what the match was. And next week, they've even announced a second chance gauntlet match for the final spot in the women's Money in the Bank match. It's going to be Sasha Banks, Bayley, Mickie James, Dana Brooke, and the entire Riot Squad. But this week on Raw, Natalya was able to qualify, and like I said earlier, there's a really good chance that she could wind up cashing in that briefcase and turn heel on Ronda, something that I called out the moment Natalya showed up on Raw. And WWE's making it a little bit obvious the way they're playing up the friendship with Ronda Rousey. You got to think something's going to happen between these two. So I was kind of hoping that it would be somebody like Ruby Riott winning the briefcase, but there's a lot of baby faces in the women's match right now. And as far as that second chance gauntlet goes for next week, you know, when you look at the participants there, I'm going to rule out Mickie James and Dana Brooke because WWE doesn't give a shit. I'm going to have Sasha Banks and Bayley cancel each other out because I think they're still building that issue between the two of them, which leaves the Riot Squad. So what better lady to win than the leader of that squad, which is Ruby Riott? And I think she should because there's enough baby faces in the match already. We need another heel. As far as what else we saw on Raw, there were 4 pretty uneventful matches that took place. We had Ember Moon defeating Alexa Bliss. Really good finish there. Ember Moon nailed the Eclipse pretty nicely, and Alexa sold it well also. We had Baron Corbin beating No Way Jose, which I cared absolutely nothing about. Dolph Ziggler did beat Chad Gable. That was an interesting match that was set up backstage. That was a pretty good match there, and I think Drew McIntyre got in the ring and kicked his ass as well. They didn't get an entrance this week, which is interesting, and I forgot to mention it last week in 499 that WWE actually took my advice last week on Raw with these two. A couple of weeks ago, we saw Drew McIntyre make his entrance, and then the music stops, and Dolph Ziggler comes out with his pink sparkles and stars and his goofy-ass music. So last week on Raw, they actually switched it. They had Ziggler come out first, and then Drew come out second, and the two of them walk down to the ring together to McIntyre's music instead of Ziggler's. I thought that was much better for the team. This week, I don't know what the hell they did, because we came back from commercial, and the match was already going on in the ring. At least I think it was. I'm going by memory here because I was doing the live stream and that's just what I remember happening. I don't remember seeing the entrance. So I think that happened during commercial. We had yet another match between Elias and Bobby Roode. These guys have been trading victories, a lot of 50-50 booking going on here, and we had Elias picking up the win this week. I'm only moderately interested in the feud. Elias, of course, is hugely over, and I love seeing him every week, but as far as his feud with Bobby Roode goes, I don't really find myself enjoying the feuds. I just enjoy seeing Elias out there as that character, and I'm hoping for big things on the roster in his future because he's one of the most over guys in the company, especially with the way the fans play along with him on everything. So I would like to see WWE do a little bit more with Elias. And then in the main event, we had a one-on-one match set up backstage. I think Stephanie set this up. A couple of buddies, Braun Strowman and Finn Balor, who were a tag team the week before. This week, they're in Stephanie's office asking her about something. I don't even remember what. And she winds up putting the two of them in a match together in the main event of Monday Night Raw. It felt kind of meaningless. It felt kind of thrown together. Didn't see the point. I guess it was just a way to give these guys something to do and give Monday Night Raw a pretty decent main event, which it was. The match was actually not bad. And Finn Balor eventually got power slammed and pinned. Strowman got the victory there, and it was a pretty decent match. So Braun Strowman is still on a roll. Don't know what the future holds for him either. He is in the Money in the Bank match. I suppose he could win it, but he's one guy that I don't think needs the briefcase. He can get a title shot without it. So he's not necessarily my pick right now to win the briefcase. I think that should go to somebody like The Miz. And we still have one more spot to be filled that will be filled next week on SmackDown. Now, let's move into SmackDown Live. SmackDown was a pretty decent show this week. We had a really good main event announced for the show, and there were a couple of good segments as well. It opened up with a Miz TV segment. Miz was out there to announce his new reality show that's going to be airing on the USA Network, which I almost forgot about, that Miz and Mrs. show, so he's very happy about that. And his guests this week are The New Day. He brings all three of them out because he wants to find out which one of them is going to be in Money in the Bank. And both Kofi and Xavier tease that it's going to be Big E, but in the end, it's just a whole lot of games and a whole lot of pancakes, and they never give The Miz a true answer. And then during commercial break, I think they set up a one-on-one match between The Miz and Big E. The match was entertaining. I'm a big fan of Big E. I've been calling for this guy to get a push for a long time. They did a little bit more teasing of that on SmackDown. Even in the Miz TV segment, The Miz made reference to the fact that the New Day are holding each other down. So you feel like they're teasing some sort of a split here at some point, and Big E is just dripping with charisma. It's like, when is the WWE going to pull the trigger on this guy? So he has the match with The Miz. It was pretty entertaining. I especially like the spot on the outside of the ring where, you know, with the boxers, they put the Vaseline or whatever that shit is under their eyes and they have them spit into a bucket, but they, instead of water, they pour syrup in Big E's mouth, and then he spits it into a bucket, and they towel him off, send him back in the ring. Eventually, Miz beats him when Sheamus and Cesaro come down to the ring to distract everybody, and in the confusion, the Miz is able to nail Big E with the skull-crushing finale and get the win there. And they did announce that next week on SmackDown, we're going to get a six-man match, The Miz and The Bar taking on the New Day next week. We had a couple of women's Money in the Bank qualifying matches on SmackDown. The first one was Lana defeating Billie Kay. This match was announced last week, and I mentioned in my last episode that I had a good feeling that Lana would wind up winning because Peyton fell short in her attempt to qualify. So I figured Billie Kay would do the same. Probably no sense in having just one of the Iconics in the match. You should probably put both of them in. So I didn't see either one of them making it in. And Lana has never even won a singles match on TV before, apparently. So she was able to win this thing. Aiden English came out there with her and introduced her. He even had a sign that said Lana Day. And she was able to score a really quick victory on Billie Kay after some distraction. And she won the match pretty quick. So she is now qualified. And how funny would it be if we have husband and wife matching briefcases with Rusev and Lana both holding the briefcase? That would be some pretty entertaining shit, I think. So we can also see on the horizon, we're all assuming here that eventually Rusev will probably wind up turning on Aiden English and reuniting as a permanent on-screen pair with his wife. Unless they keep English with him for a little while longer. I do like the guy, but I'm starting to smell some sort of a turn in the future there. The other women's Money in the Bank qualifying match that we saw came later on in the show, and that was Naomi defeating Sonya Deville. So we had Lana and Naomi qualifying for the Money in the Bank, leaving only one spot open, which will be determined next week on Monday Night Raw in that gauntlet match. We had Andrade Cien Almas out there again to defeat another jobber. Looks like they're going to do that with him for the next few weeks before they move him into a program with somebody. I mentioned the two women's matches and Money in the Bank earlier on. We did have a Carmella interview on SmackDown Live where she seemed pretty confident in defeating Asuka, and right now I think it's still very much up in the air what they do there. I'm still standing behind the claim that WWE is not going to change both of these belts. I think one champion is going to lose the belt, the other one's going to retain, and Carmella figuring out a way to defeat Asuka would be pretty fun for bragging rights. Kind of like when Jericho beat Austin and The Rock in the same night, and he didn't shut the hell up about it for, 15, 20 years, whatever it's been. So I think Carmella can kind of do the same thing here, but putting the belt on Asuka would be a really good way to set up your rematch between Asuka and Charlotte at SummerSlam. And this time, instead of Charlotte being champion and tapping out Asuka to retain, Asuka can be champion and tap out Charlotte to retain. So if that winds up happening, all those people after WrestleMania that claimed Asuka was ruined, here she is 2 months later winning the women's title at Money in the Bank and then defeating the woman that defeated her at the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. So we still have to wait and see here how the match goes with Carmella, but aside from any shenanigans, aside from Carmella pulling some shady shit to score a cheap victory here, I would assume Asuka is going to tear this girl limb from limb. But right now, I'm completely open to any sort of finish they want to do. If they want to have Carmella steal a victory here, she'll have another Mellebration and talk about how she beat the two most dominant women in WWE's history in back-to-back pay-per-views. That might be pretty fun, so I'm open to it. I'm not going to be one of those people that insist that Asuka absolutely must win this match. If she does not, they've ruined her. I'm not stupid. I know that they can go a lot of different directions with this. If it was up to me, yes, I would love to see Asuka win the belt because I want to see the rematch with Charlotte. But if not, what's the big deal? At the end of the day, I really don't care what the WWE does here. It would be nice to see Asuka win the belt so she can get that rematch with Charlotte. But if not, hey, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Next up on SmackDown, we had an AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura segment. Now, we're trying to find out from Shinsuke what the stipulation at Money in the Bank is going to be. He won the match last week, which gave him the right to announce the stipulation. A lot of us have been speculating on the Last Man Standing match, and I really wasn't sure if a Last Man Standing match is something that a heel heel would ask for. It almost seems like something a babyface would ask for, so I might have done the match differently last week. I might have had AJ win, and AJ announced that it's a last man standing match, but instead it was Shinsuke. He kind of teased that it was going to be a pillow fight at first, which was really funny. Eventually it led to a brawl. They were beating the shit out of each other and brawling into the audience and everything. Eventually, Shinsuke, I think, hits AJ with a chair shot and lays him out, and then starts counting 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10, and then gets on the mic and says, last man standing, which makes sense because the way the match ended at the Greatest Royal Rumble, both guys fell over, couldn't answer the 10 count. This stipulation, I guess, makes sense, but what if that happens again? You know, they can essentially do the same exact finish at the Greatest Royal Rumble. This stipulation really technically doesn't solve anything, and it doesn't guarantee us a winner. And I'm still wondering what they're going to do with Nakamura. Is he going to win the belt or not? He's had a hell of a lot of opportunities, and he's faced AJ Styles a lot of times. Is he finally going to win the title here, or is WWE giving up? I mean, I think that he should. If Shinsuke Nakamura does not win the WWE title, then literally where does he go? There's nowhere to go but down. He's had all of these title opportunities, fallen short against a couple of different champions. You know, eventually you just got to stop. So I almost think that maybe he wins the title. The blow-off happens at Extreme Rules, which will be a lot of matches when it's all said and done, 7 or 8 between the two, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then Nakamura can go into SummerSlam, possibly to defend the title against somebody like Daniel Bryan. And if The Miz winds up winning the briefcase, can we say 2013? That might be a lot of fun, having Daniel Bryan win the title at SummerSlam and The Miz come out to steal it. Oh man, the options and possibilities are endless as far as the WWE title situation goes, and if a SmackDown guy winds up winning the briefcase. We are going to get a tag team title match at Money in the Bank as well. That was determined on SmackDown. There was a number 1 contenders match between the Usos and Gallows and Anderson Gallows and Anderson picked up the victory there. I was fine with that. Hit one of the Usos with their finisher and won the match. They will be taking on the Bludgeon Brothers now at Money in the Bank for the tag team titles. So that's an interesting matchup there. And then, of course, in the main event, this was a match that was changed. This was supposed to be Big Cass versus Samoa Joe in a Money in the Bank qualifying match. But Big Cass got injured, and there's some talk. I wasn't even sure if the injury was a work or not. Some people thought that it was. Apparently, the injury is legit. They did the segment last week with Daniel Bryan, where Daniel Bryan kicked his ass and fucked his leg up, and Cass was tapping out and screaming like a little bitch. And that knocked him out of his match with Samoa Joe. So what they did instead is they gave Jeff Hardy and Daniel Bryan a second chance opportunity. Both of those guys lost qualifying matches in the past few weeks, so they put them together in the main event. The winner is going to face Samoa Joe next week, and then the winner of that match will be the final entrant into the Money in the Bank. So Joe was out there to do commentary for this. Pretty good match between Daniel Bryan and Jeff Hardy. Kind of a dream match here. This is a match that we have not seen. I think it was the first time ever, unless these guys cross paths on the indies somewhere, but I don't believe they did. So this was the first time ever for them, which was kind of nice to see. And in the end, Daniel Bryan got the win by tapping out Jeff Hardy, and he will go on to face Samoa Joe next week, and the winner gets the final spot in the match. Now, that opens up a lot of possibilities as well, because between Daniel Bryan and Samoa Joe, whoever loses there, what do they do at Money in the Bank? If Big Cass is not going to be out of action for very long, or if his injury is a work, I can see him coming back next week and costing Daniel Bryan the match against Samoa Joe, putting Samoa Joe in the ladder match and putting Daniel Bryan one-on-one with Cass at Money in the Bank. That seems the most likely option there. I don't think WWE even needs to put Daniel Bryan in the Money in the Bank match unless they plan on having him win it. And Daniel Bryan, again, like is the case with several talents, he's one of those guys that I don't think needs the briefcase to get a title shot. He doesn't need it. Charlotte doesn't need it. Braun Strowman doesn't need it. Even Ember Moon doesn't need it, if you ask me. I think all of these people can get title matches on their own without a fucking briefcase. So I don't know if I even want to see Daniel Bryan in the match. So I might like to see Big Cass show up and cost Daniel Bryan the chance. Samoa Joe then gets a big win because don't forget he's right off a loss to Roman Reigns. So you got to think you want Joe to, get back on track here. So he should find out a way to defeat Daniel Bryan next week, whether he has help from Big Cass or not. I think Joe needs to go into the briefcase match, and Daniel Bryan either needs to work with Big Cass at Money in the Bank or, I hate to say it, potentially be left off the card. Because I really don't know what you do with Daniel Bryan if Big Cass can't go at Money in the Bank. So you guys let me know what you think can happen there. As far as Money in the Bank goes, let's kind of run through the card here. Here's what I have written down. We've got Gallows and Anderson taking on the Usos for the tag team titles. I just mentioned that a minute ago. We have Roman Reigns versus Jinder Mahal, Carmella versus Asuka for the SmackDown Women's title, Nia Jax versus Ronda Rousey for the Raw Women's title. We have the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match. So far, we've got Natalya, Alexa Bliss, Charlotte, Ember Moon, Becky Lynch, Lana, and Naomi qualified for that. We're going to get one more in the final entrant next week. And in the men's match, we've got Kevin Owens, Bobby Roode, Braun Strowman, The Miz, Rusev, Finn Balor, and one member of the New Day. And then we're either going to get Daniel Bryan or Samoa Joe to round out that group. And, of course, we have the last man standing match for the WWE title, AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And we're potentially going to get Daniel Bryan versus Big Cass, maybe even Sami Zayn versus Bobby Lashley. And what do they do with Seth Rollins? Right now, there is not an Intercontinental or a United States title match announced for Money in the Bank. Next week on Monday Night Raw, I believe Seth Rollins is defending his Intercontinental title again, this time against Jinder Mahal. I don't even know if there's enough room on the card for an Intercontinental title match, but I would like to see Seth Rollins do maybe an open challenge for Money in the Bank, something like that. Maybe somebody returns. What's the status of Dean Ambrose? Does anybody have any word on his injury? I think that would be a cool way to bring him back. What if Seth Rollins is at Money in the Bank, comes out to the ring, John Cena style, and announces a challenge, open challenge to anybody in the locker room, and Dean Ambrose comes out to the ring? That's actually a match I might predict. Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins for the Intercontinental title at Money in the Bank. Keep a lookout for that. It might happen. But aside from that, I don't know what they're going to do with some of these guys if they don't have anybody to work with. Seth Rollins could potentially be left off the card. So could Daniel Bryan. So could Samoa Joe. And Sasha and Bayley, that's another one. I don't know if they're going to try to put those two together and have some sort of a match. We're going to have a kickoff match. We know that. Hopefully, the B team will be involved in some sort of a kickoff match. So we're going to get one or two matches, I'm guessing, announced for this pay-per-view. Right now, I'm only counting, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, we're probably going to get one more match and maybe something on the kickoff. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. We'll have to wait and see what happens next week. And in a couple of weeks, probably for episode, 502, will be my predictions video for Money in the Bank. And aside from that, the other big news of the week, speaking of SmackDown, is that SmackDown is going to be moving. It's going to leave the USA Network in the fall of 2019, I believe in October, and it's going to move to the Fox Network. Now, this was some news that was speculated on. A lot of people saw this coming. NBC Universal even declined an opportunity to keep SmackDown because they wanted to keep Raw, and they wanted to make sure that they can get Raw re-signed to a deal, so they had to kind of let SmackDown go. And Fox has picked up SmackDown for $1 billion. $1 billion. Motherfucker. If WWE put half of the amount of their energy in creative that they do in business, they'd have a pretty fun, entertaining product on the air. It amazes me how much money is floating around between the $500 million they got from Saudi Arabia and now a full $1 billion from Fox. Holy shit. As far as what that means, I don't know. There's a lot of things that it could mean because there's some rumors out there that, number one, it could be switching nights. And there has been some rumors about SmackDown maybe moving to Friday. Now, this is over a year away, so I'm not really concerned too much with it yet. But if it does move to Friday, that's going to kind of suck. And it's really going to make me wonder if SmackDown does move to Fridays, do you think WWE is going to go back to taping it? Unless part of the deal, unless part of the $1 billion is that SmackDown must air live, that's a possibility. So maybe they have to go live. But with a show airing on the network on Friday, it would seem like WWE might want to go back to that old format of doing their tapings on Monday and Tuesday. Just that 1-2 punch. It's probably a lot easier logistically and shit like that for them to do it that way. So they'll air Raw live on Monday nights, and then on Tuesdays they'll do the SmackDown taping, just like they did for so many years when SmackDown would air on every other night of the week, Thursdays and then Fridays, and hell, I think they were even on Wednesdays for a time there. So it's up in the air what that means, and I don't really know. And there's also talk about it potentially going to 3 hours. That's fucking crazy too. So if it does go to 3 hours, that kind of makes me think it might stay live. But if it turns out to be a tape show, that's going to kill the brand extension. That's going to essentially kill it, because if one show is taped, it's not going to feel as big. SmackDown is already the B show as it is. They are going to a bigger network. I have not I can't tell where they're going to be, if it's going to be on the actual Fox channel or Fox Sports. Either way, it's a pretty big channel there and a pretty big platform, but this might go on the full-on broadcast Fox channel, which is a huge audience for WWE. So I'm hoping SmackDown remains live. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to call it SmackDown Live anymore. It's going to have to go back to SmackDown. And I don't know if I really want to see it go on another night of the week either. And if they do that, imagine what that's going to do to my commentary schedule. We're going to see some changes this year as well. I'm already doing some things to kind of spice things up on the channel. So who knows what I'll be doing on YouTube by the time we get to next year. But if I'm following my same format that I follow now, how the hell am I going to do a Raw and SmackDown review? I'm going to have to break them up because now SmackDown airs at the end of the week. I'm going to have to do fucking Sunday commentaries, and it's going to throw everything. It's going to throw a monkey wrench in everything. So I'll be interested to hear the details of when SmackDown makes the move, what they're going to do, how long the show is going to be. Is it still going to be live, or are they going to tape it? And it looks like USA will retain Monday Night Raw, which is good. I don't want to see Raw leave. You know, they've been on the USA Network now for like nearly 40 years, 35 years, something like that. As long as I can remember, WWE programming has been on the USA Network, so the old school fan in me, the nostalgia fan in me wants to see WWE at least keep one show on the USA Network, and it looks like that will be the case with Monday Night Raw. So that pretty much wraps up your wrestling news, your Raw and SmackDown review, a Money in the Bank preview. Before I get out of here, I want to answer a few questions. Figured I would do a little mailbag segment. I had asked you guys to email some questions in. I wasn't going to have time to answer 20 questions or anything like that, but I wanted to pull out a few questions from some of my best listeners, and I wanted to give my patrons on Patreon an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So let's start with some email questions. I want to start with a very big fan of the channel, probably one of the biggest fans I have, Christian Sanchez. I always try to get to you whenever you send in a question. You asked me my thoughts on Eric Bischoff challenging Vince McMahon at Slamboree. I remember that. That was 1998. And that was a funny pay-per-view because the reason Eric Bischoff, the reason he made that challenge is that was his answer to WWE doing the DX invasion. I was at that show in Hampton, Virginia for Monday Night Raw when DX showed up in Norfolk, I think at the Scope, where Nitro was, which was right down the road. And I was watching all of this in the arena that night on the Titantron. And without the benefit of television and being able to watch this on TV and listen to the announcers, I'm watching this and I cannot believe what I'm seeing on the Titantron. I'm like, look at Triple H's arm. He's got a WCW armband on. What the hell are they talking about? And I'm trying my hardest to try to hear what they're saying, and I eventually was able to understand that they're fucking with WCW. And then later on, they showed up in Norfolk and did the whole thing and tried to invade, and that's why Eric Bischoff challenged Vince McMahon. That was like his answer to what WWE did. And it was kind of a brilliant move because you have to know that Vince is not going to show up. Eric tells stories that he was approached by a few wrestlers that knew Vince McMahon, said, hey, be careful what you do here. He might show up, and if he does, he's going to kick your ass. But I never really thought Vince McMahon would show up at Slamboree. There's just no way he's going to do that. Vince is not even going to acknowledge these guys challenging him and calling him out. But he didn't show up. They did try to do the match on Slamboree. I remember Tony Schiavone making a real snide comment. They had like a Vinnie Mac cam outside the arena, and a car pulled up, and Schiavone said something like, well, if Jim Ross gets out and carries his bags, you know it's Vince, or something like that. But Vince never showed up. Eric Bischoff was declared the winner by forfeit or whatever, and I guess it was just WCW's way of trying to get back at WWE. But the writing was on the wall by that point. WWE had already started winning in the ratings. They had just won during the Vince Austin segment, and they were gaining a lot of momentum, and WCW was on the downslide, and I think they knew it. And I think a little bit of Eric Bischoff's motivation came out of desperation. They knew that WWE was breathing down their necks and the tables were turning, and they were trying anything they could, to show that they were the best. And they failed in that instance. It really didn't make Vince look any worse by not showing up. Nobody really thought he would. So I remember that very well, though, Christian, and I appreciate your question. Frank Canales had a good one about Magnum TA. I always enjoy when I get questions about Magnum TA because what happened to him was so tragic, and I remember watching the NWA in the mid-'80s and what a huge star that guy was. And Frank, you asked me, would Magnum have changed the landscape of wrestling had it not been for his injury? And I say yes. I think the guy would have been a big star. I think eventually Vince would have grabbed him. There was just too much marketability there. Magnum PI and Tom Selleck, who's actually a distant cousin of mine, if you can believe that, was really hot at that point, and Magnum TA looked a lot like Tom Selleck, and he had that mustache, and he was a big guy, and he had the mullet, and he had the muscles, and chicks loved him, and he looked great. And I think Vince McMahon could have taken him and made him a huge star. I don't know if he would have been as big as Hogan, but he definitely could have been a big babyface. But maybe at that time in 1985, WWE didn't have room for another big, muscular, blonde-haired babyface. Maybe Hogan would have been too much. Maybe Hogan would have held Magnum down. You know, Magnum wouldn't have been able to reach the levels because Hogan was there. That is a possibility. But I think Vince and his WWE marketing machine would have done big things for Magnum TA, and he would have been a huge star because he had everything. He was good in the ring. He had the looks. He had the charisma. He was, you know, the total package before Lex Luger even came around. You know, Magnum had everything. So I think he could have been a big deal, not only in the NWA, winning multiple world titles there, but if he were to be lured by the money of New York and Vince McMahon got his hands on him, I think he could have been a huge star, and he would have been on ice cream bars and had merchandise and been a pretty big player in the WWE. Such a shame what happened to him, and he was never able to reach his potential. But he had some classic matches when he was healthy, man. To quote Roddy Piper, when he was well, he was hell. And if you've not seen any work of Magnum TA's, go back on the network or go check YouTube and find some of his matches and his interviews and get a look at the guy. You'll be impressed with what you see. I promise you that. We've got one here from Rabat Majid. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but you asked me who is better at backstage politics, Hulk Hogan or Triple H? Hulk Hogan is probably the only guy that could come close to Triple H. I think Hogan would probably be the best in the entire business at backstage politics, but how can you argue against Triple H? Look at where he is. Look at where backstage politics got Triple H. From the minute he got to the WWE, he got in good with the Clique and got a good spot on the roster there. And then next thing you know, 3 or 4 years later, he's dating Stephanie McMahon, and now he's going to be the heir to the throne. He will be the next Vince McMahon. And had he not politically gotten involved with the Clique, he could have been released. He could have been released a year later, 2 years later, or something like that. Vince McMahon could have fired him after the curtain call. Triple H would have been gone, probably would have headed to WCW, and would have never met and fell in love with Stephanie McMahon. And it would be really interesting to see what wrestling would look like today if Triple H and Stephanie never got together. I guess Shane McMahon would be the one involved. But between Hogan and Triple H, I'm going to give the nod to Triple H on backstage politics because he made it farther than anybody. And finally, in the emails here, Martin Tomlinson, thank you for your email. You've asked me this a couple of times. Did I like DX or NWO better? I liked them both in my own special way. I guess you also asked which one was better. I'm going to go DX just for the longevity. It seemed like DX never went in like a drastic downswing when they were together, the original three with Shawn and Chyna and Triple H and Ravishing Rick. They were very over. And then when Shawn left, Triple H picked up the ball, added the New Age Outlaws and X-Pac, and it turned out to be a hugely over babyface group. In the NWO, they were amazing in the beginning. I mean, that first year there was incredible. Nothing can ever top that. But after a while, you started adding too many guys. Then the NWO split up. Then you had red and yellow, or I'm sorry, you had red and black, and you had white and black. And it got very confusing. It was hard to follow, and you just got lost in it. DX seemed like they had more longevity, and all of the heat and all of the, you know, how over the NWO was in that first year, that did not translate into 1999 or 98 or even 2000 when they tried to revamp it. I think it was, what year was it that they tried to redo the NWO with Jarrett and Bret Hart and the Outsiders? It was never the same. And I think overall, even though I think NWO was more successful in that first year, and it truly did change wrestling. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and that whole thing in the NWO changed wrestling, but it really only lasted a year or so. After that, it went drastically downhill. Let's move on to some Patreon questions now. I appreciate everybody that supports the channel on Patreon, and there is a new tier up on the Patreon page right now if you want to check it out. And that is, if you do make one or more donations or pledges of $100, I will do a video, a YouTube video on any wrestling related topic you want. It could be a wrestler's career, it could be a DVD, a pay-per-view, a match, a situation. anything you want me to talk about, aside from giving you a top 100 video or something like that, I'm not going to do that, obviously, but any one topic or any one subject, provided that it's wrestling related, I'll do a video and dedicate the entire thing to you. You'll get full credit and full shout out in the video. I've already got my first one that I'm working on now for my buddy Barry, who I'm going to answer a question from here in a second, and that is a new option now on Patreon if you would like to support. So let's start with the Patreon questions now and start with David Porkchop. You asked kind of an interesting one, and it was hard for me to come up with an answer here. You want to know, what is my favorite pay-per-view match that is considered to be bad? That's a good one. There's a few of them. There's one that I heard recently that I was really surprised that some people thought is a bad match when I think it's one of the best matches in WWE history, and that was SummerSlam 1990 with the Hart Foundation and Demolition. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match. The Harts won the belts that night. The Legion of Doom was out there. I just loved the match. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the drama. I loved the way it all played out. I thought it was one of the greatest title matches in WWE history. But in recent months, I've actually heard people shitting on this match. So that could be one. Andre and Hogan is another one. Andre and Hogan was a bad match at WrestleMania 3. It was horrible. But I found myself enjoying it. I thought it was one of the most memorable matches, or the most memorable match in wrestling history, especially with the body slam, and I was there to see it live. And you know what? Speaking of SummerSlam 1990, I'm also going to go with Hogan and Earthquake. I thought that was a much better match than it gets credit for, and I thought the two guys wrestled a pretty good match together, but everybody says that that match sucks too. But that's kind of a tough question to answer, because most matches that are considered bad, I also consider to be bad. So there's not too many that I disagree with. And you guys are welcome. Give me some examples down below, because I had a heck of a time trying to answer David's question here. I was racking my brain trying to think about matches that are considered bad that I liked, and I couldn't come up with too many. So hit me down below in the comments with some of your ideas. Barry from Hawaii, who I just mentioned a minute ago, I will be working on your video in the month of June, so keep a lookout for that. And you had a couple of questions. One was, do I watch Camp WWE on the network? I've only checked it out a couple of times. I think I've watched one episode. It was funny, but I just haven't found myself, like binge watching them or knocking them all out. So I don't really watch it much. But I did find myself liking the little bit that I saw. And your other question is, do I prefer wrestling tournaments to be in one night or spread out over several shows? I've always been in the one night camp. I love one-night tournaments. I loved the tournament at WrestleMania 4 and at Survivor Series 1998, the big 16-man tournaments that they would do, the early days of the King of the Ring when it would be done all in one night. I always thought that was better. Spreading it out, I just don't understand it. I don't know. I don't understand why you even do that. I think any tournament that wrestling should have should take place in one night. That's my opinion. But that's not always the case. But to answer your question, yes, I prefer it all in one night. Rice Jones as well, thank you very much for your patronage. And your question is one that I know I've answered before and talked about before, and that is, should The Rock have faced Triple H at WrestleMania 16 in 2000 instead of Backlash the next month? That is a resounding yes for me. I think that's exactly what they should have done. There was so much going on at that time. I hated that WrestleMania, the entire card. If you go back and look at that WrestleMania, there's like no one-on-one matches on that show. There's battle royals and 3-ways and 4-ways and tag team ladder matches and all this shit. But there's no like one-on-one matches at that WrestleMania. It's crazy. I think you should have at least had that in the main event. And given the build with Triple H and The Rock was trying to find his way back to that title. He just appeared on Saturday Night Live and got huge publicity for the WWE. It seems like, especially with Stone Cold Steve Austin out of action, injured on the shelf, WrestleMania should have been The Rock's moment. But you had Mick Foley retiring the month before, so they wanted to get him in there. And then all of the McMahons were involved, of course. Big Show seemed out of place, but he had Shane McMahon, I believe, in his corner. Stephanie was with Triple H. Linda was with Mick, and Vince McMahon was with The Rock. And then I think he turned heel in that match. Triple H wound up retaining the title, and I hated it. The next month, they got it right. They even had Stone Cold Steve Austin appear. He came back early from injury. What was he supposed to be, the referee or something in that match? He wound up coming out and cleaning house. Or no, I'm sorry, I think he was supposed to be in The Rock's corner in that match, and he didn't show up until the very end with a chair, bashed the shit out of everybody, and The Rock was able to win the WWE title, and it was a great moment and a great main event of a pay-per-view and a very memorable time in wrestling when Rock won the belt that night. But I think I agree with you. I think it should have taken place 1 month prior to that at WrestleMania 16. It just would have made for a better moment for The Rock in my opinion. And finally, John Riffle, should the Big Four pay-per-views all be in stadiums? I say no. I say save the big football stadiums and the big arenas for either really special occasions or just WrestleMania. I think you can sometimes do a pay-per-view at a stadium. They just did the Greatest Royal Rumble. They did the regular Royal Rumble at the Alamo Dome a couple of years ago. So every now and then I'm perfectly fine with it. I would love to see SummerSlam go to an outdoor stadium. I've pitched the idea of them coming right here to San Diego and holding the event at Petco Park. I think that would be awesome. The only problem is it's right in the middle of baseball season, and there's no way WWE would be able to come in there when the Padres are on the road, set up for SummerSlam, and make the whole set, have the show, tear it all down in time for the next set of games to come through. There's just no way it's going to happen. But I would love to see SummerSlam do an outdoor show. So aside from, every now and then, I would prefer just to see WrestleMania remain in the stadiums and everything else be in regular sized arenas if it was up to me. So there you go. Those are the only questions I'm going to answer. I just wanted to pull out a few there of some people that had some really nice things to say. And of course, everybody that supports me on Patreon, anytime I do a Q&A, I will always be sure to put up a separate post on Patreon just for you to ask your questions, and I will answer every single one whenever I do a Q&A. So I want to thank you guys again for hanging out with me this week on Monday night during the live stream, and of course, listening to this podcast. And thanks for all your amazing support over the years. 8 years now, 500 episodes. It's been a lot of fun. And I have been planning on doing a few different things with the channel. I want to evolve the channel. We're only at about 20,000 subs here, and I would like to find a way to make this channel maybe a little bit more efficient, and I'm coming up with some ideas to do that. So in the next few months, you might be seeing some changes. Also, for those of you who have been asking, because I have gotten a few tweets about it, you'll notice that not a whole lot is going on right now over on TVTrax's channel. He is apparently taking a small break from uploading. A lot of YouTubers go through this. You experience some burnout or just a really crazy, insane personal life, which I know happens to me all the time. And on top of that, he's had some issues with his videos. A lot of you guys are asking me where all my videos are. They should start slowly showing up from what he has been telling me. But, as a fellow YouTuber, I know that dealing with YouTube behind the scenes you can run into some problems. And I think he's trying to work out some issues there. But I really feel uncomfortable speaking for anybody. So if you have any questions about any of this, please send your tweets over to TVTrax and ask him. I'm sure he will answer your questions directly. I don't want to speak for him, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but he is taking a little bit of a break and trying to work out some of the issues with the video. So hopefully he'll be back doing what he's doing at some point, and my content will be back featured over there on his channel. So keep a lookout for that, and if I get any more updates, I will be sure to pass them along to you. So I will catch you guys next week. I should be up here on Monday. I'll probably do a live Raw watch along, hang out with you guys again, and I'll be up here next week at regular time for episode 501. Holy shit. So have a great rest of your week and weekend. Thanks for hanging out, and thank you again for being really, really awesome fans. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. Talk to you soon. Peace.
This has been a Good Mike Work Commentaries production. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/GoodMicWork. Follow Greg Morgan on Twitter at GoodMicWork and visit GoodMicWorkCommentaries.com for all the latest podcast and video content.